Hi, I'm Dylan Paris, and this is Ultra Choice. Now I want to get a couple things out of the way really quick. This is the iPad Pro 11 2018 model with 256 gigs of SSD storage. This device is probably the coolest device I've ever owned. It pretty quickly became my most used piece of technology, and it's something I take with me pretty much anywhere for a lot of reasons. I think this is a really incredible piece of technology. I think there's so much you can do with it, which I hope you've seen on my channel before, and more I even want to show you. But this video is not about all the great things that this device can do. This is a video I wish I didn't have to make. But this video is about the things I really don't like about this device, and specifically my primary issue, which is with how Apple markets this device to people like us, who love to create stuff, who want to have portable, powerful technology to make video and music and all kinds of stuff. Now, a couple of caveats. I'm running the iPadOS 13 beta. I think we're on 13.1 now. These caveats are important because they explain the context of the situation I'm in. One, when I tried to back up my iPad before I upgraded on my Windows PC, even though I installed iTunes on my HDD, my 2 terabyte drive, it refused to acknowledge that and wanted to back it up on my SSD, which is the same size as the iPad and has other stuff on it. I searched forums and Reddit and all kinds of places and could not find a way to make sure that the backup would actually go on the hard drive. Because of this, I'm stuck on iPadOS 13. Now that's a choice I made. I knew if I got the beta that I wouldn't be able to go back. So every time Apple's messed up this product with different updates in the beta, I've been forced to deal with them. Now that's my fault. I recognize that. The other big thing that I did, that I know some people on YouTube claim they've done, but I'm not so sure they have, is that I sold a MacBook Pro for the iPad Pro. I did. It's been my primary media production device for at least the last 6 months. I built a desktop, but honestly, I do my video editing in LumaFusion. I do my music production in Core Gadget. The only times I really use my desktop are for gaming, for mastering songs with the Isotope plugin suite, for backing up large amounts of data, and for the occasional long-form video edit. But honestly, I prefer LumaFusion. So that's the context. What am I mad about? I'm mad at Apple. Look, the iPad's an amazing piece of technology, but every single flaw that this device has is a specific choice that Apple has made or a specific mistake they have not corrected. For example, they market this device as a music production device. Something you may not know because sites like The Verge and even larger YouTubers who talk about the iPad didn't talk about is for the first 3-ish months of the life of this device, it could not handle music plugins like Moog's Model D or a variety of audio unit v3s. Running a single instance of one of those in an app like AUM or Cubasis would result in crackling and an instant spike in CPU and RAM usage. Now, most people believe that this is because when Apple was creating iOS 12 for this iPad specifically, they treated all audio applications as though they were background streaming applications like Spotify or SoundCloud, instead of production CPU-intensive tasks like music production and Cubasis. Because of this, professionals like myself bought the iPad Pro and couldn't use Pro applications until iOS 12.4. Until then, we were forced to freeze tracks in Cubasis, run built-in sounds in apps like GarageBand or Cubasis, and essentially the entire Moog suite was out. The ramifications of this were that Moog got negative reviews in their iTunes store page because people thought it was their fault. Other developers faced the same issue, and this is all because of Apple's oversight on a device they marketed to pros. They later corrected this issue, but when I look in forums like AudioBus and Reddit threads, there are a lot of people who swear the 2017 10.5-inch iPad Pro is the machine to get if you're doing music production. Something about the hardware and the software on that device allows it to process sounds like layer and other complex synths in a way that's more efficient and powerful than the newer iPad Pro 2018. I've often debated, should I sell my iPad Pro and go to an older model or go back to a MacBook? There are benefits of this device that I've covered in my previous How I Use iPadOS video that maybe outline why I'm sticking with it for now, but the cons are worth talking about. For example, I edit all of my videos in LumaFusion. Now, LumaFusion is constantly being updated. I think they're keeping up with the iPadOS beta updates, so they're doing a great job. This is not a direct complaint at LumaFusion. However, I believe the combination of Apple's walled garden approach and only recent introduction of a file management system, with the beta nature and the constant updating nature of iOS and iPadOS, means that I run into issues exporting videos in LumaFusion all the time. I hear about people having issues with exports in Premiere, and it's happened to me once or twice, but to be honest, in comparison, apps like Final Cut and Premiere are a dream, and they are not available on the iPad. Rush doesn't count. You can only pull in stuff from Photos, which on a device with a file management system in 2019 is ridiculous. LumaFusion is an amazing app that constantly gets better, but it's the only app, really, for video editing on this device. You do not have the kind of choices you have on a Mac. And that means that every flaw in LumaFusion is essentially a flaw in the device itself, because Apple refuses to make anything like Final Cut for this device. If I was Apple, I would be chomping at the bit to buy the entire LumaFusion team and call it Final Cut 10 Mobile and be done with it. But this really gets to one of the bigger hearts of my complaint. Apple markets this device as a pro computer replacement. Pro is in the name. Now I know until recently, pro is a word that Apple threw around that didn't really mean anything anymore, because there were MacBook Pros that were substantially weaker than just basic iPads you could get for $200. But that's changed. Even the basic MacBook Pro this year, the base model, has a quad-core processor and by most accounts can handle 4K editing, at least in Final Cut. I know this because I've been extremely tempted to switch. And the reason I've been extremely tempted to switch is because trying to do large media production, large scale media production with the iPad Pro is a headache. For example, the clip that started this video is me trying to plug in a 500 gigabyte Samsung USB-C hard drive into my iPad. Obviously, when this device came out, people weren't able to do that. But since the introduction of iPadOS 13 in beta form, the expectation has been that we should be able to export footage and files onto external hardware. Now there are caveats. Your drive's supposed to be an exFAT or FAT32. Or a Mac-specific format, which I can't use because I have a PC, not a Mac. So what's the problem? Even formatted in exFAT, my iPad refuses to talk to the Samsung drive. This sucks because the Samsung drive is 500 gigs. I could easily manage a lot of files back and forth between my camera, my iPad, and any other device if I could use an intermediary device like this external drive, which by all accounts I should, but because I'm stuck in the beta limbo and it hasn't been resolved, I can't. And before the beta, this was not an option at all. I really do like the iPad, but when it's your only device, you start to see all of the flaws with this. Now there are pros. In my opinion, the music production ecosystem in iPad is unparalleled. Sure, you don't have Ableton, you don't have Pro Tools, but you have Cubase 2, Beatmaker 3, Aria Pro, Core Gadget 2, which is my current favorite, and a multitude of other quality apps just for DAWs, let alone the plugins you can use. The scope of these is not as vast as what's available on PC or Mac. However, the cost of them is a fraction of the price of those platforms. This means that for the same price as something like the Ableton suite on a PC or a Mac, you could get almost every plugin you could dream of, the entire Core Gadget suite and all of the Gadget in-app purchases, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff, maybe accounting for sale prices. This isn't necessarily full retail always. However, your dollar goes so much further in music production on the iPad. And with the iPad Pro 2018, USB-C means that you can power audio interfaces and other external devices much more easily than you could before with the Apple Camera Connection Kit and Lightning. But all of that said, I keep finding myself wondering, did I make a mistake? Should I have stayed on Mac instead of iPad? There are things I can do on this iPad I definitely couldn't do on a Mac, at least in the same way. No Mac has a touchscreen, and you're not going to be doing animation work on the touch bar with an Apple Pencil. The ease of use, the portability, things like Affinity Photo, Core Gadget, and other apps like that make the iPad the place I want to be. But the roadblocks I run into when I'm trying to use this as my primary device are infuriating, and they are Apple's fault. If Apple wants pros to use this device, they need to prioritize this device for pro usage. That means introducing their pro apps like Logic and Final Cut to this platform. That means taking things like file transferring and backup and exporting extremely serious. I shouldn't have to buy iCloud storage as my only primary means of backup. I bought the Greenlaw keyboard case for iPad, and it's been pretty cool. I have a review for it in the link below. However, it's ridiculous to me that Apple didn't have an option like this. I had to go to Amazon to find a way to have my screen be able to articulate at multiple angles. That Apple doesn't create an option like this and that you have to go to third parties seems strange to me. The fact that mouse support is only an accessibility option is ridiculous. Hey, Apple, adding mouse support will not take away from how awesome multi-touch is. But on the topic of multi-touch, some point in the middle of this iPadOS 13 beta cycle, Apple introduced a feature where if you put 3 fingers on the screen at once, anywhere in the OS, it introduces a dialog prompt for undo and redo. Now you might be thinking, hey, that's a convenient way to have undo and redo. No one wants to shake their iPad. And I agree with you, but it's impossible to turn it off. Now here's something else people do with 3 fingers on the iPad quite a bit if you are a musician. Triad chords. Basically any chord. Essentially any chord in any music production app was completely nerfed with this update, and at least 3 updates since then, I have not seen them actually solve it. In the latest update that I'm on, it no longer shows the prompt, but it still kills the input. Things like this tell me that even though Apple says this is a pro device, in their head, they imagine you in a fine suit, in a high-end office, in the skylines of New York, sitting back and watching Apple TV's The Morning Show. Meanwhile, the Mac Pro cheese grater, the iMac Pro, and the MacBook Pro are the true Pro devices. And when the iPhone 11 Pro comes out, I don't think Pro is going to mean anything anymore anyway to that company. I honestly try to stay positive on this channel because there's so much negativity in the world. And honestly, as a person who deals with depression and anxiety, I don't love dwelling on the things that upset me. But it feels like the only way to get Apple to do anything is to go on YouTube and complain about them. So hey, Apple, fix your stuff. Please. People are spending real money on this and making choices based on your marketing and your words. When you call a product Pro, it needs to be Pro capable. When you say this can replace your computer, you need to understand that people have decades of understanding of what a computer is. And when they come to this platform, they expect to see something with a semblance of that. Have you introduced improvements in computing with the iPad system? Absolutely. There are reasons I don't want to go back. But the fact that as a video creator, potentially your core audience, I create music, animation, drawing, and video, all on the iPad Pro, exclusively for the most part. I am your core audience, and I am telling you, your product frustrates me constantly. And it doesn't need to. Maybe all of this will be done and easy and over once iPadOS 13 truly launches. Something tells me it won't be. The fact that it took 3 months for my brand new iPad to properly do music production, the fact that we've gone this entire summer with a litany of changes that were supposed to make the iPad more functional and have often reduced the functionality I did have. I look at something like the MacBook Pro, the $1,300 or $1,200 if you have a student discount base model. I watch people edit 4K video in Final Cut, which I own a license to but can't use because I traded mine for an iPad, which was my choice, but I believed in the iPad. I believed that Apple believed in the iPad. But then I look at the way they've treated us. The content creators who chose the iPad, the ones who saw Apple's vision for the future and believed them when they said this is the future of computing. Like Dieter Bohn at The Verge, like Jakob Hack, the musician who primarily uses iPads. We are on the front lines here, trying to use the technology that you've created in the ways that you say we can. But what you're offering is GarageBand when you should be offering Logic. What you're offering is iMovie when you have Final Cut Pro. You can't go around saying, this company can make their full desktop software on our portable device, but we won't. Where are you on this device? Where is true mouse support? Where are accessories that bring the most out of the port on the back that's supposed to handle data, power, input, and all kinds of stuff? Where are the truly functional USB-C accessories that provide a litany of support that you create and not just your third-party supporters? And where the hell is the headphone jack? Seriously, I know you think no one needs it on a phone, and that's an argument I disagree with. However, on a Pro device, not having a headphone jack as a musician means I had to buy 3 of those adapters, and I still lose them sometimes. Do you know how infuriating it is to spend $800 to $900 on a device, get on the streetcar, get on a bus, and then realize, oh, I can't do music production on the road because I don't have a headphone jack? For those of you saying, why don't I just use Bluetooth headphones? That's a totally reasonable question. Especially because of how Apple's marketed their devices, you would assume Bluetooth would allow you to do music production because they show people doing music production on iPhones and iPads, right? The latency in Bluetooth audio at this point in 2019 in September, it's not there. You hit a button, you wait, you hear a sound. With a wired connection, it's instantaneous, or at least a level of latency that's essentially imperceptible for people. So the thing I come down to is, am I going to keep the iPad Pro or am I going to sell it and get a MacBook? And honestly, I'm in too deep in the iPad ecosystem. I have basically every core gadget now because I got them on sale. I have a ton of AUV3s that I use with AUM. I really do believe in the dream of the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement, but I see the workflow that people have with a MacBook, with Final Cut Pro, with Ableton, with Machine, these pro-level pieces of software and hardware, and I feel like I'm missing out. I feel at least partially like the marketing and the hype around the iPad Pro as a device does not directly correlate with the capabilities. If I could go back, I would not sell my MacBook. I would get the MacBook Pro, probably a refurbished model, and then I would get an older gen iPad because Core Gadget will run fine on an iPad Pro from 2 years ago. Even the iPad 2018 model or an iPad Mini 5 would be able to handle most of what I do, even 4K video editing. And in return, I would still have a MacBook that could handle Final Cut, Ableton, and other stuff like that. I like having my setup be portable. So even though I have my desktop that I built, I don't really like to use it that much. I like being able to do my work where I am, on my lunch break, on the train, on the bus, at my girlfriend's house. The iPad Pro in its ideal form is the perfect device for me. But I don't know if Apple really has it in them to make it that device. And I'm worried that the device that will really do that is one they're gonna wanna ask me to pay another $800 or $900 or even more down the line. Maybe it's not a fair comparison. The MacBook costs more, even the Air costs more, but Apple calls this a Pro device. And in my opinion, a Pro device needs to be made with professionals in mind. They're taking steps, and I'm glad to see it. But I kind of regret buying in so hard on Apple's dream of the future. And I would recommend that you think a lot about what you need from your computer and your devices before you jump in as well. If you really want to get in on the iPad future, my recommendation is to get an iPad Mini 5 from this year and a MacBook, or a Windows laptop of your choosing if you prefer DaVinci Resolve and Premiere over Final Cut. If anyone at Apple's watching this, please know I have a lot of respect for what you do, but I really do feel like you're missing the mark when it comes to professionals in the iPad OS and iOS world. Thanks for watching. This is a bit of a deviation from my normal content. If you like technology stuff, music production, feel free to like and subscribe. All of that really helps my channel, and this is something I'm excited to do moving forward, even with the technology headaches that working just on an iPad provides. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Slight PS. If you want more information about iPads versus MacBooks or what production setup is right for you, I highly recommend the channels Noah Herman and Henny the Business. Those two are killing it when it comes to detailed coverage of these devices. Cool. All right. Later.